Okay, hello everyone. It's 2 o'clock, and that's 2 o'clock in the Eastern time zone where I'm speaking from right now. So thanks everybody for joining us on time. I just want to give everyone else a moment or two to get through all the clicks and get the technology working. And I see people streaming in, so I'll hang on for just a few more moments. Thanks again for everyone who has joined us on time. Looks like quite a few new people have just joined us, so just give everyone else just another few seconds. Okay, it's just after 2, so let's officially start this webinar, and I'll do that by saying hello everyone and welcome to our webinar today. This is one of Wild Apricot's monthly expert webinars. And today we are honored to have Sean Kosofsky with us. Sean is a leading expert when it comes to running nonprofits and helping nonprofit leaders solve tough problems. In fact, he's known as the nonprofit fixer. And I'm going to bring Sean on shortly, but first let me introduce myself. All right, that's my face on the left. My name is Donald, and I'm on the Wild Apricot content team. And beside me is my colleague Rano. That's his picture there. Thankfully, he left his snake at home. That is a snake, yes. All right, thanks, Rano. And Rano's here. He's going to be on chat, and he'll help you with any technical issues you might have. So during the webinar, feel free to ask any questions to us or Sean. And to do that, you can use the chat box. I want to make a couple of quick reminders before we move on. All right. First, I want to let you know that we are recording this session, and we'll be sending you an email with a link to the recording within the next couple of days, so please watch out for that. And also want to let you know that we are a CAE approved provider. So by attending today's webinar, you are eligible to earn 1 CAE credit. And we'll get going in just another couple of minutes, but let me briefly say that today's webinar is being brought to you by Wild Apricot. And I know that lots of our customers are here with us today, so welcome back and hello to all of you, but we always have lots of people who are new to Wild Apricot and aren't familiar with Wild Apricot, so I want to welcome you as well. And for those of you who don't know, Wild Apricot is membership management software. It's actually an all-in-one solution for anyone running a membership organization. And that's because you can manage your member and contact database, you can run your events, you can build your website, process all your payments and more. And many of our customers consider it a lifesaver because it saves them hours a day in administrative tasks, freeing them up to focus on fulfilling their organization's mission. And we're quite thrilled with what many of our customers have been able to accomplish. We've watched many of them grow since we started 12 years ago, as you can see on the screen, and they've watched us grow too. And thanks to many of our customers, we've been, there you see on your screen, ranked as the #1 rated membership management software solution on the market for the last 6 years. And while we pride ourselves on helping people with great software, we're also a leading provider of free educational content, which you can find on our blog and of course in webinars like today's. If any of you happen to have questions about Wild Apricot, we're happy to answer them, but we'll do that at the end of the webinar, so you're all free to stick around with us after the hour if you're able. And now I want to introduce Sean. Sean Kosofsky, there you see on the screen, is the founder of Mind the Gap Consulting, which helps nonprofits in a lot of ways to raise more money, build stronger boards, and grow their base, for example. In helping nonprofits, Sean draws on his 25 years of working in and leading nonprofits. He has been an executive director for 4 organizations and has an extensive background in a lot of areas like policy, direct service, program development, communications, fundraising and management, and more. And he is the developer of a popular training program for executive directors called Executive Director Boot Camp, from cautious to confident in less than 10 hours. I'll let Sean tell you more about the boot camp and all the other ways he helps nonprofits at the end of his webinar. But in case you're curious about the boot camp now, I'm going to have Rano paste a link in there. I think you'll get that very shortly. You can also check out Sean's website, and we'll just throw the link in there as well. But you can get all of this at the end of the webinar as well from Sean. So now let me call on Sean. Sean, first of all, thanks for working together with us leading up to the webinar. I appreciate all that you've done, and I'm going to hand the webinar over to you now. So thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Don, and to the entire team at Wild Apricot. I'm super excited to give this talk today, so thank you so much. So let's see, it looks like I do have control of the mouse, and I'm going to, I don't have control of the mouse, it looks like. There we go. So again, my name is Sean Kosofsky. I've been in nonprofits for about 26 years, and right now I'm consulting, and my firm, Mind the Gap Consulting, is the main place where I do my work, although I'm a part of another firm nationally in the United States. And I kind of go by the nonprofit fixer. I'm a generalist, so I work in nonprofits at pretty much every area. I'm not a specialist in one particular area, so I refer to myself as the fixer because I can come into most nonprofits and find efficiencies and reduce duplication and improve systems, and so that's kind of like my brand. So let's see here. Oh, there we go. It's working now. So a little bit about myself. Got my undergraduate degree many, many years ago. Oops, let's see here. This is, the controls are doing something a little weird. There we go. Hold on a second. It's a little buggy. Hopefully now it has stopped. Okay, there we go. So got my undergrad degree in political science a long, long time ago, my master's degree in public administration just a couple of years ago. Again, 25 years, 26 years in nonprofits. I've been the executive director, as Don mentioned, for 4 different charitable and political organizations. And I got a broad experience in this area. So as Don mentioned, I've done direct service, I've done policy, I've done political action committees, ballot measures, political campaigns for candidates, local, startup, national organizations, and I've done just a little bit of everything. So that's why see myself as more of a generalist. So I've got a broad background that I bring to this topic, and so that's why I think I can apply a lot of this advice to lots of different kind of nonprofits and different sizes. Excuse me. All right, so we're going to dive right in. Today's topic, of course, is about the 6 biggest mistakes that executive directors make, and we're going to take questions at the end, but if folks have questions throughout the presentation, feel free to enter them into the question box, and the Wild Apricot team will field them at the end. So feel free, if something occurs to you in the moment, don't forget about it, put it into the question box as we go. So there are many mistakes that executive directors can make, but we can't list them all. We can't go through them all in a short window of time. So I decided to pick 6 that are pretty bad. These are ones that are really critical mistakes, and they keep coming up, and if you can avoid them, you'll be way ahead of most executive directors. And so the first one I want to talk about is not spending time building rapport with your board. So not spending time building rapport with your board, especially, it hurts the executive director and it hurts the whole organization. A big theme you're going to hear about throughout this webinar is the idea that an executive director should be working in partnership with the board. So it isn't just that the ED runs the organization, and the board governs the organization. They really should be working in partnership at all times. And that power dynamic between boss and ED, or the board being the boss and the ED being working for them, needs to be diminished in a lot of ways, because it really is a partnership. So building a rapport with your board is really critical. Many executive directors see boards in an adversarial role, which is really unfortunate, almost as if they're outsiders and uninformed outsiders. They see boards as a challenge to overcome instead of as allies in the fight to achieve their mission. And this is really unfortunate, because it's very tempting, of course, in nonprofits to see the board, which is made up of volunteers that don't really work there, as people that are that they don't really get it, or they're not really in the fight the same way that the staff is. But it's easy to get sucked into that kind thinking, but it's really not helpful, especially not for building rapport. Boards are time consuming, and that's okay. It's okay that people and boards are time consuming because ultimately a lot of your time needs to be spent on people, whether it's staff or donors or your board. But specifically, it's okay that it takes a lot of time because it's one of the most important things you need to be doing. Building rapport is time consuming, but it is well worth the energy. It's also a common complaint, of course, many of us know that boards are a mess. They are dysfunctional. There's something about this whole system of having volunteer boards running the place, even though they don't work there, that really frustrates a lot of executive directors. But given that, we still need to push for alignment and trust. So one of the biggest mistakes an executive director can make is not investing the time into building rapport with their board. Again, building alignment and trust is something that is vital for them. So the next slide, we're going to talk about the solution to this particular mistake. So one thing you should do definitely is be meeting regularly, buddy up with your board chair and with your board. Meet regularly with the chair and support them in their role. Board chairs are sometimes exhausted by their own day job, and then the board chair role is so time consuming, they need support too. So as the executive director, you should definitely be meeting with your board chair regularly and with the board as often as possible. So wherever you see something in red in this presentation, that means we have a free giveaway and a free tool for you. And so at the end of the presentation today, if you stick around, we're going to give you a link to a landing page where you can download all the stuff I'm going to talk about that's free in today's presentation. So one of the things we're going to give away is a check-in template. So I think that executive directors should be meeting with their board chair about every 2 weeks or so to check in with a regular, consistent agenda, certain things that are always on the agenda to talk about. And we're going to give you a free check-in template for the ED board chair relationship at the end. Also, another thing that EDs can do to undo this reluctance to build rapport with your board is to seek input into meeting agendas. So whenever there are board committees or full board meetings, the executive director should be seeking input into them. It might be that in your organization, the chair builds the agenda with the rest of the board for the board meetings, but sometimes the ED is really driving that. So as often as possible, one way to build rapport and trust and affection between board members and the ED is to include them, ask their opinion. Doesn't mean everything they want to cover at the board meeting is going to happen. It just means that being asked for their input is really important. Also, you should be building a majority support for votes. So if you think there's going to be a tough vote ahead at the board meeting for a budget or some new program you want or some decision, you should be building support for that in advance of the board meeting. Don't surprise people. Don't just expect that because they like you, they're going to vote with you. This is not how it works. So a big mistake that executive directors make is not building that support in advance. And by building rapport and building trust, you will get more of the votes passed that you want. Also, keeping the board informed. Boards will trust you and like you and evaluate you even better if they feel informed and up to date on stuff. Now, this is tricky because board members each want information in a different way. Some board members hate email. Some of them would prefer to use Basecamp or some collaboration software to be communicating with each other. In general, find the right sweet spot for how much information your board wants. Maybe it's just really exciting updates or certain milestones that you've hit. But again, less is more. I struggle with this as an executive director. I never know how much to share with my board. I've gotten down to maybe once a week sharing an email with them for non-urgent items that I think they need to know, but board members appreciate this. Also, in building rapport and trust, you should see it as just as important as fundraising. So, and I'm not exaggerating here because it is critical to the ED's career to invest in rapport building. And we'll talk a little bit about this in a second, but it's just as important as fundraising because high-performing organizations invest in this. So make time to meet and appreciate your board members. Recognize them during board meetings and outside of board meetings. Meet with them when you've got a chance to connect with them personally. Also, notice things about their personal lives. So if someone recently had a child graduate or a dog that passed away or something like that, like reach out to them, talk about that, ask, say, how is your daughter doing? I heard about your pet. So building that kind of rapport and those little personal connections when you're not even talking shop or talking about work, that really matters. So in this red word here, Someone please correct me if I'm wrong here, but I learned about this term a long time ago. It's a Spanish term, and I don't think there's a English version of this or an English equivalent to this, but this term conocimiento, which really means putting people before task. And putting people before task is sort of a radical idea in a way. It's common knowledge to do this, but it also works against what a lot of people say about being efficient and keeping meetings to a minimum and only working for efficiency. But putting people before task is a really, really important thing, especially when it comes to building rapport. So when I say putting people before task, I mean, don't just dive into the work when you get to see people. So if you start a meeting or you start a call or you start some kind of project together, first check in with each other. It only takes 3 or 4 minutes. Ask people how their spouse is doing. Ask people how their kids are doing. And those couple minutes are really important because we get to break down some walls and get to know each other better. So we're going to send you a YouTube video that I created about this term conocimiento and about valuing putting people before task. And then finally, the highest performing executive directors invest in this. So in building rapport, there's actual academic research around this. The executive directors that last the longest, that are the happiest, that have the best careers are those that have solid commitment to building rapport with their board. So there's evidence to this. It's really important. Spend time getting to know your board members. It's okay to be vulnerable. This is important. You don't always have to have all the answers. You don't always have to be the smartest person in the room. It's okay to admit when you've made mistakes. It's also just the gestures and the personal interest in other people's lives that all really matter. So I'll give you a small anecdote. When I was running an organization in New York, I made a commitment every time we had board meetings. Our board meetings were only quarterly. So every 3 months or so, my board members would come in from all over the country. And I would make sure that I built the entire weekend. It's a time commitment, but I'd build the entire weekend around having lunches and coffees and dinners with people that were coming in from around the country, because I knew that getting to see people and breaking bread with them and connecting with them outside of work was really, really valuable. And I think it goes a long way in someone's career to making that commitment. So again, when you're meeting with people outside of work and outside of the board meetings, try to not talk shop. Try to actually get to know each other as people. And this is really critical. So when you're trying to build rapport with your board, one of the big 6 mistakes that we talk about here, these are the ways you can prioritize building rapport with your board. So next, the second biggest mistake that we make, that executive directors make, is avoiding fundraising, avoiding the ask by delegating or through excuses. And this is really, really important because I'm a lifelong fundraiser, so I believe in this in a big way. Resisting the temptation to hide behind excuses. Oh my God, there's just so much email. I have all these meetings. I'm just busy, busy, busy. These are all excuses. The things we get done are the things that we prioritize. And if fundraising is a priority for your organization, you will prioritize it. So we have to find a way, and there's productivity tips and all sorts of stuff around how to get your schedule more oriented toward the big buckets, the big rocks of work that you need to do. And there's more workshops we could do about that. But resist the temptation to hide behind excuses for why you're not doing the fundraising. Don't wholly delegate this either. You need to play a role. It is very tempting for executive directors to say, oh, I have a development committee, or oh, I have a development director, so I actually don't need to do the fundraising. I can focus on program or on operations or working with my board. That is just an excuse, and it's not wise. This is a huge, huge mistake. At the end of the day, organizations can accomplish more if they have more money, and the executive director needs to play a major role in fundraising. So again, don't wholly delegate it. You have to play some kind of role. If you want people to do jobs, if you want people to do their job in the agency, you need to model good behaviors. If you want your staff doing the things you hired them to do, then one of the things your board hired you to do is fundraising. And therefore, and there are few exceptions to this. There are some organizations that they just don't need to do fundraising, or they've structured themselves differently, but 90% of all nonprofits that are not grant-making foundations, the ED needs to be a major fundraiser in the organization. So model this behavior. Also, donors want to hear from the executive director. So You can't just hide behind the fact that your development director is going to be doing all of the asks or your board committee is going to be doing this. Your top donors want to hear from you, and that means making the time to be involved in the largest gifts that are sought throughout the year, whether they're from corporations, foundations, or individuals. So a way to undo this, a way to work against this big mistake that executive directors make. If you aren't good at fundraising, learn it. It's that easy. It's one of the most important skills to have, and one of the most important things to learn in a nonprofit is how to fundraise. You also should be the top fundraiser in the organization. I'm a big believer in this. It doesn't mean that you should be spending most of your time fundraising. It does mean that the largest gifts and the largest solicitations and the biggest part of fundraising should have your fingerprints on it. You should be the top fundraiser in the organization. That's my bias, that's my belief, and I believe the highest performing organizations use this strategy. Also, change your perspective. I'm a big believer that if you see fundraising as a chore or as a pain in the butt or as something that is just a necessary evil, you'll never love fundraising. I happen to love fundraising because I believe that moving wealth from where it lives to where it can save lives is an amazingly rewarding thing to do, to help fund the movement, to liberate money from the bank account that it's in and getting it into my bank account for my organization so I can fund all of the great work we're going to do. So if you change your perspective and see fundraising as joyful, you'll actually want to do it more. There's few things that feel better than seeing that commitment or grant acknowledgement letter coming in saying that the work will be funded, right? Also, creating the conditions for success. Executive directors need to create the conditions for success for fundraising. That means training everyone in the organization to know how to fundraise. It means providing the right materials, a good case statement, a good website. Also, PR, making sure that the organization is in the media and creating the right conditions to be successful in the media. And then one of the things we're going to give away again at the end is this board worksheet. So creating the conditions for success means working with your board with a really, really good handout, a really good tool. So at the end, again, you'll get this board worksheet that I created that gives you tangible, concrete things to ask your board to do to raise money. And then don't wait for people to come to you and ask for where you could be involved in fundraising. You should be going back to your development director or your development committee and say, hey, where am I most needed? Do you need me calling certain donors? Do you need me shoring up some donors who aren't renewing this year? Ask, where am I most needed? So again, the second biggest mistake executive directors make is that they resist the temptation to fundraise. They hide behind excuses to not fundraise. The solution to that would be the #1 fundraiser in the organization and to find a way to commit yourself to doing that. The third big mistake that executive directors make is the reluctance to fire low performers. This is always sounds aggressive to people when I talk about firing folks, but it's important. Sometimes we even need to fire board members and volunteers. So I think, of course, we all want to be liked. We all want to be liked. One of the reasons why we don't like administering discipline or talking to employees or firing anyone is that we want to be liked. We don't want people to think that we're mean. We worry what people will think about us. Oh no, if I have to talk to this person, then they're not going to like me anymore, and then their work will suffer. It's just you can't have that attitude. Of course, addressing low-performing employees is unpleasant. We don't train people well to correct bad performance, and we don't train people well how to fire people. So it's not a skill that you typically learn. So it's why people are really nervous about doing it. We make excuses. Oh, the people working for me are working for very little. They're very nice. What if I'm the problem? What if I'm actually the bad manager? In all of these different cases, they're just excuses. At the end of the day, being afraid or being reluctant to fire someone does hold back a lot of executive directors from reaching their success. You do have a duty to the organization, to your board, your stakeholders, to everyone to get results. You were hired to get results, not to be liked. And once you can convince yourself of that you're hired to get results, not to be liked, you will find that it's easier to terminate low-performing employees. Just a quick little anecdote. When I was running a women's reproductive justice organization in North Carolina, I had an employee who did something that was pretty bad. I had sent her off to a conference, so our organization was paying for her to be at this conference, but on her own time at dinner later at that conference, I think she probably was drinking a little bit and said something that was really, really horrible. I happen to be a gay man. She said something that was really, really hurtful and really just pretty awful about gay people, specifically me, something bad she wanted to happen to me because I was gay. And I really struggled with this because word got back to me that she had made these comments. And I remember I had never really fired anyone before, not on my own. And I remember hearing this story that had happened, and I talked to a couple of my peers. I said, you know, hey, she did this really hurtful thing, but she wasn't really on the clock, and she's allowed to have attitudes about me that she's allowed to not like me, and she's certainly allowed to have her own biased opinions. But a number of my colleagues were like, hey, if you wouldn't fire someone for this, what would you fire them for? She's your frontline organizer. And even though she's at a dinner on her own time, other people at this conference that you sent her to heard this. This is a problem. You need to fire her. And once I convinced myself, yes, this is a fireable offense, and this is important that we not allow this kind of behavior to go on, because clearly she didn't trust my leadership or like me. I had to move forward and terminate her. And I had to learn the skills pretty quickly on how to make a successful termination. So these are things you just sometimes have to do. And I will say here that on the slide, you'll see that firing and rehiring is a hassle. We know this. So I know that terminating an employee leads to a gap in the work, and it also leads to the hassle of having to do a search. But you can outsource that. I've done this for nonprofits before. Hire an HR expert for $2,500 to create the job posting, do the search, and bring you the top 5 candidates. You can actually pay for that to be done for you so that you can free yourself up to do other work. But don't let someone stay in your organization if they are underperforming or hurting the organization. So the solution to this, about the being afraid to fire people, is to build your team. Build your team really in a strong way. So employees being fired should not be a surprise. If by the time you get to an employee and need to terminate them, if they are surprised at the fact that they're going to be terminated, you have failed as a manager and as a boss. Employees need to know about their performance problems before they are surprised with a termination. So the example I gave was an exceptional incident that happened that was absolutely cause for termination. But most people get fired because of performance problems. So again, you should be letting your employees know if performance is suffering. There's other ways and multiple ways to fire. So for example, you could just outright fire someone and terminate them when you need to terminate them. But you can also coach them out, and that means helping them find another role somewhere else in some other organization over a certain window of time, but like helping them see that it is in their best interest to probably find another role. You can also create another role for them or find another role in the organization. Maybe if they're bad at administrative assistant work, but they're great at policy, you can move them into that kind of role. If they're a bad performer, chances are it's not going to work, but that is an option. You can also turn them into a vendor, into an independent contractor, and move them out of a full-time role. You can also use severance and pay people to leave, essentially. There's also a long exit horizon. You can let someone know, hey, this isn't really working out. I'm going to give you 4 to 5 months to find a new position, but by then we are going to fill this role with someone else. These are all sorts of different ways to get someone out of your organization that is a low-performing person and gives you an excuse to do this without feeling like you're being mean. Hire better. We also need to be better at hiring the right team in the first place, so you don't have to fire people. We don't screen people really well. We ask the same kinds of questions every time we hire people in our organizations. And I think if we ask people better questions and create better job postings and check references that aren't the ones that they send you, but other references off of their reference list, and run them through scenarios when you're hiring people, all of these things are going to get you a better quality candidate so you don't end up having to fire them later on. Again, best indication of future behavior is past behavior. So when you're screening candidates, ask about what they've done in the past. Ask what they would do in certain situations. Also monitor your employees. Do check-ins. Every 2 weeks, you should be meeting with your direct reports and just figure out what's going on. Are they stuck on something? Are they duplicating someone else's work? Checking in with your employees is critical. Repeat backs are also really important to make sure you can avoid firing someone by working on performance issues. Repeat backs are great for anything that you delegate. If you give something to someone and then you want to make sure it's done correctly, have them repeat right back to you what it is you're expecting them to do. When you're both aligned, it makes it a lot easier to get the work you were expecting from your employees. Finally, performance improvement. If you need to sit down with an employee and let them know that their performance is suffering, there's a script for this. So at the end, we're going to give you a link, and it'll send you to another link where you can download a sample performance improvement script so that you can actually say to an employee. So again, the third biggest mistake is the reluctance to fire people, and it means usually avoiding these steps too. We're going to give you some tools in this slide deck and in the end to help you work past this kind of reluctance to fire people. The next mistake that executive directors make, I think I have hit the button, but it did not advance. Let's see if this works. Here we go. So the fourth big mistake that, oops, it's getting a little buggy here. Jumping ahead and letting everyone see the answers here. So the fourth biggest mistake is that yes equals less of you. Don't say yes too much. If you say yes too much, you will diminish your effectiveness. This is me giving you permission to say no more often. But if you say yes too much, you will diminish your effectiveness. You will have board members asking the world of you, donors asking for lots of little things to do because they want a lot of attention. You will have other coalitions coming to you saying, sign on to our thing, come to our protest, or whatever it is. You can't say yes to everything. Also, the lack of clarity and alignment with your board creates this kind of stress and burnout. So getting clear with your board about what your job description is, what things you do and what you won't do gets clear. You will get fewer requests to do stuff if they know what you're focused on. But essentially that lack of clarity and alignment on the role of the ED is what creates some of this. And members of the community will also understand what you're working on if you're very public about that. And we'll talk about that in a second. So the ways to solve this, propensity to say yes to everything is to, let's see here, I've hit the button, but it's not, there we go. So to stop saying yes to everything, say no, practice saying no. It's more sustainable. First tip is do a few things well. Do a few things well instead of 20 things poorly. And this is a relief to actually say, look at all these things on my desk. Look at all this stuff on my to-do list. I'm going to cut it in half, make half of it go away and just do the stuff I need to do. I want to do a few things well instead of 20 things poorly. It helps you say no to things. You can even role play and practice saying no. Sit down with your board chair or some other peer and say, I need to practice saying no to things. And I want to say it in a nice way. And so you can do that kind of practicing. Also, reviewing your goals. Look at your goals every single year. Make some trade-offs and decide your priorities. It is liberating to get stuff off of your plate and to do, again, a few things well. Make your strategic goals public. Tell everyone in the world what you're focused on with your strategic plan. Put it on your website, put it in your board report, put it in the media, and people will come to you less with things to do when they know that you are super laser focused on, again, doing the things that are in your strategic goals. Care less about being a people pleaser and be a people leader instead. Keeping everyone happy means you will be less efficient. So again, think about how do I effectively lead instead of how do I keep everyone happy. Again, you will rock your annual review if you do this. At the end of the year, when you are evaluated by your board as an executive director, they're going to look at the job description and the goals. Did you meet those? They're not going to care about all the other wonderful stuff you did to help people. They're going to be adjudicating you on your goals. So make sure that you get that stuff out of the way first, that is a priority, or else you might be hard pressed to explain where you were spending your time and why you didn't meet some of those goals. Finally, just strike the right balance between being strategic and being insular. You don't want to say no to everything, and therefore no one wants to play with you. So just being strategic. So the fifth mistake that executive directors make is they get blindsided by a bad financial situation. So some executive directors never check the financials before their first day, and I have a story for you about that. I've done it. Also, not monitoring the financials in real time as you're running the organization. That can get you into a lot of trouble. Also, forgetting to get oversight from the board. These are big, big mistakes. I can't tell you how many executive directors have gotten themselves in a lot of trouble because they were not monitoring the financial situation. So just an anecdote from my time in North Carolina running a women's organization there. Between my hire date and the date I started, everything changed. Everything changed at this organization. So in particular, um, uh, the organization switched the way it was fundraising from its charitable arm to its political arm. And anyone in the United States knows that if you're doing charitable work and political work, you have to pay from two different pots of money. This organization made some bookkeeping decisions to fundraise for the political arm instead, but everything went south and they started losing money and hemorrhaging money. So in between the time that I accepted the position and when I arrived in North Carolina to take the position, they had been hemorrhaging money, and I hadn't been asking about the books in that window of time. Also, our national organization, we were a chapter, our national organization had endorsed Barack Obama for president instead of Hillary Clinton, and most of our supporters were Hillary Clinton supporters. So we had effectively angered all of our donors. So I arrived and this damage had been done, right or wrong. This damage had been done to our donor base. And then the national economy collapsed. This was August of 2008. So the national economy collapsed. They were hemorrhaging money. The organization had debt that they didn't tell me about. So I wasn't good about asking the right due diligent questions about financials. And I arrived and found myself a great big surprise. We were able to solve it and fix it, but my own mistakes have taught me to warn other executive directors about this. So that is one story about what happened to me. So now the solution for this, of course, is easy. I think that if you need help understanding financial statements, ask for help. Talk to your treasurer, bookkeeper, someone, another peer executive director, but understanding the balance statement and understanding the income statement, the profit and loss statement, those are the two that you really, really need to understand. Everything else will make sense if you understand those two documents. But also don't forget to review financial statements. Executive directors need to be reviewing the financials monthly. I know it's boring. Sometimes the numbers all just like get all foggy in your head and you're like, what am I even looking at anymore? But essentially you must be reviewing the financial statements or you're not doing your job. It's critical. Insist that the board be involved. This is a, pardon my French, but this is a cover your ass moment. This is a cover your butt moment, because if you are looking at the books monthly and your board is also looking at the books monthly, maybe it's the treasurer, maybe it's someone on your finance committee, then that's all the more helpful to you, because if something happens and something goes wrong or someone missed some details in the books, you can say, hey, it wasn't just me. I was looking at this with the board. We all missed this detail, or we all didn't see this shortfall coming. So it's really, really critical to make sure someone on the board is working with you monthly, not quarterly, but monthly, to look at the books. Also, don't let cash flow challenges creep up on you. Do a cash flow document. It took me years to learn how to get a cash flow document that worked for me, but now I could project 6, 7, 8 months into the future to learn when I was going to run out of money. And that helps you make all sorts of decisions. So don't let cash shortfalls creep up on you. Have a cash flow document and work with your board on that. Also, never conceal cash flow problems. This is a huge, huge problem. Quick little story. A friend of mine was running a nonprofit in North Carolina, and she saw a cash shortfall coming and decided not to tell the board. She thought she was being really, really altruistic. I'm not going to tell the board that we're going to have a month where we don't have enough money. Instead, I'm just going to go without getting paid. I'm going to skip 2 paychecks. I can handle it. I have a partner, so I have income coming in, but I don't want the board to think that there's a problem, and I don't want them to challenge my leadership or think that I made a mistake, so I'm just going to float myself during that window. Never do this. She ended up getting written up by the board because she concealed income problems. The board owns the organization, and the board is responsible for its solvency. Lying about revenue is what Enron did. Enron, of course, one of the most famous bankruptcies in history. They were lying to investors and to the world about their profitability. So if you think about it like this, it's not that altruistic, it's fraud. And you should not be concealing revenue problems to your board. You should go to them for help. So this is a huge thing I've seen executive directors do, and I'm cautioning you, please, please, please do not do it. So one of our last ones here, the 6th big mistake that executive directors make: lack of clarity early on with the board about expectations, roles, and the division of labor. So you don't want 12 bosses. I don't want 12 bosses. However many people are on your board, you don't want that many bosses. Executive directors need to know who the one person on the board is that they report to. Of course, the whole board is the boss for the ED, but they only need to have one person supervising them for a lot of reasons. So it's a lot more sane if the ED can get clarity early on who the one person is. Normally it's the chair, but it could be someone else with HR experience. Also, this leads to conflict and conflicting priorities, confusion, hurt feelings, and low morale. So don't let it happen. Staff should not be reporting to the board and an executive director. Staff should be reporting to the executive director, and that's it. That means the board should never be assigning tasks to staff, ever. They go through the ED to the staff. Of course, some small, young, and flat and grassroots organizations may have a different model for this, but I'm telling you that you don't want too many cooks in the kitchen. There you see in red, this term get in your lane. There's a little screenshot here. At the end, we're going to give you an infographic on get in your lane about who is supposed to be doing what in a nonprofit. The executive director, the board chair, and it's a 2-page document. It's a great infographic, and hopefully you will appreciate it. It'll give you some tips. So how do you solve this problem? Get in writing who your supervisor is. Early on, the ED should ask the board chair in an email, who is it that I report to? And that way it is clear from then on out that you don't have a bunch of people trying to act like your supervisor. Also get clear on decision-making authority. Put it in your contract and your job description. When I say decision-making authority, I mean get clear early on. Am I allowed to speak to the media? Am I allowed to join coalitions? Can I endorse legislation? Do I have that authority as an executive director to do those things? If you don't get clear on that and then you do something, you could get slapped back by your board. So again, getting clear on roles and division of labor. Also, get clarity about how the board works with the staff. Again, you want a situation where everyone on the board works through the ED to talk to the staff. Of course, they can all have their relationships, but assignments and tasks and things like that should all go through the executive director. Just a quick little anecdote, I was the problem once on a board. I didn't realize that I was the one doing that. The executive director was saying to the whole board, please stop contacting the staff, go through me. It's just very confusing for my staff. And I was like, am I someone doing that? I hope I'm not the one doing that. And the executive director was like, yes, you're actually one of the people doing this. I needed to get quarterly financial reports from a certain staff person. So I didn't think I was assigning work. I thought it was my fiscal responsibility to get these reports. But I heeded what the executive director said and went through him from then on out to make sure that I got those reports through a request through the executive director. Finally, we promised 6 big mistakes, but we have a bonus for you today. So we have an extra one. Not getting an employment contract. This is probably my biggest pet peeve. I certainly have been guilty of this, but I'm telling everyone here who is or will be an executive director, get an employment contract. Not getting an employment contract makes you incredibly, incredibly vulnerable. Even boards should want their EDs to have an employment contract. You are supervised by volunteers who do not work there. You are vulnerable. All it takes is one board member to not like you and they can build a majority for your exit. It sounds stark, it sounds threatening, and it is. You don't want your career to be ruined, your income to be ruined. Get an employment contract. This is probably my loudest hair on fire kind of warning for people, is this bonus mistake that people make. I specifically have been in situations where it is because of my employment contract that it has saved my job, because I had someone on the board who was insisting that I do certain things or that I have to get requests for paid time off approved in a certain way, and that wasn't true. And so this board member was coming after me, and I used my employment contract to protect my role in the organization. We both went back to our corners and cooled off for a little bit, but having that employment contract really protected me. But I've certainly led a few organizations without an employment contract, and it left me very vulnerable. When I discovered this and requested that I get one in my last job, it was vital. I also have other friends who didn't have this, and they lost their jobs because of just small problems with personalities on the board. So I just want to really implore you to get an employment contract. And then the solution to this, as I mentioned, is go get an employment contract. In the packet you're going to get from us by filling out the form at the end, you're going to get a free employment contract. This is worth hundreds of dollars. I had a lawyer write up a boilerplate employment contract for an executive director that is incredibly generous to the executive director. So for any of you on here, just know that when you get this sample employment contract, it is incredibly generous. We wrote it that way so you would see what a really, really generous contract to the executive director looks like. Expect pushback from your board that this is too generous, but you should just see what a model ED contract looks like. You must tailor it to your state. Do not take the language I've given you and assume that it just works. Definitely talk to a lawyer in your state to retrofit it to your situation. So that's pretty much it for the 7 mistakes that executive directors make. And I just want to say a couple things about my practice, and then we'll move on to questions. My website is mindthegapconsulting.org, not .com, .org, mindthegapconsulting.org. You can go there for free tools, free consultation. Follow me on social media. What I work on is coaching, consulting, and training. And so I do work with executive directors, board chairs, and I help people doing career changes. If you're going from the private sector into nonprofits, I've helped people retrofit their resumes and their unique value proposition to change careers. Consulting is pretty obvious, and then training. Don mentioned the Executive Director Bootcamp. We're going to offer people a discount today. So they've included the link for everyone, but if you go to my Executive Director Bootcamp, which again is less than 10 hours of content, it's a pre-recorded webinar-based course. There's lots of more information, lots of free handouts throughout this course also to set you on your course. But if you use the code WILD-APRICOT right above my photo there, if you use the code WILD-APRICOT, you'll get 50% off the course. It's normally $250 for the course, but if you use that, you can get it for half off. So that's just a little bit about me and my course. And Don, I think we can hand it over to you now. And if you can also share the link for people who have stuck around so that they can get my packet of freebies.
Thank you, Sean. Yeah, we'll just gonna get Rano to share the link in. Okay, he's just doing that now. Okay, that's the link. Okay, wonderful. Yes, we do have quite a few questions that have come in, and let's try to take as many as we can before we have to wrap up. So, so actually, a few people were asking, sort of when you were talking about the cash flow stuff. So somebody's here is asking, what have you implemented to monitor cash flow? And they said they use a spreadsheet. So is there some advice there? And I think someone else was asking about if there are any tools that you have that you would recommend.
I had a professional bookkeeper design an Excel spreadsheet. So the bookkeeper that was sending us our monthly balance statement, profit and loss, which is the income statement, and other statements monthly, I reached out to her and said, will you please create a cash flow document that basically is just like all of these? And maybe it's in the same document that you send every single month. So it's all neatly compacted into one document. And anytime there was a big change in expenditures or income, I would go into that tab and I would make those changes myself. So I had someone create an actual spreadsheet with formulas in it that could clearly show, okay, if we're going to get a grant in July, that was put in July. If we were going to have a big expenditure because of our gala in November, it was right there. So I had someone design it for me, but it was in Excel. I looked at it regularly, and anytime I would change anything in a cell, it would update everything. And I could see I highlighted this one cell at the bottom right, the month I run out of money. So it was always like the number I was looking at. I run out of money 12 months from now. Whew, I'm good. I can go home today. I can go home at 5 o'clock today. But having that kind of document that gives you a quick, making sure your formulas work in Excel. Some other people may have nifty software that lets them do this with a dashboard. I just use Excel.
Great. Okay, thank you. Yep. And then, so somebody's saying, what tips do you have for improving a board, especially if you've inherited a weak, disengaged one? Might be a common problem. What processes for maintaining or nominating volunteers work well without creating the sense that the ED is being heavy-handed? If you've got some thoughts there.
Well, building a better board, so most people have stepped into organizations with a low performing board. I'll just be honest, that's I think most boards. Most people built their board by grabbing people who are just around them, friends, family, people we like, and forgot to tell them or give them an orientation or tell them what their responsibilities were going to be. So when I came into NARAL, the Women's Reproductive Rights Organization in North Carolina, the board had been built mostly of people who were not told they needed to fundraise. And when I started, I said, if you give me this job and if you hire me as executive director, I'm going to require that the board have a give-get, an actual fundraising goal every year of $5,000. But if you hire me, just know I'm gonna apply pressure on this. Maybe we implement it over 12 months or 24 months, but we are going to do that. They hired me, so I sat down with every single board member and said, how much are you giving or how much are you getting right now? Only 2 or 3 of them were actually working on this. And over a 12-month window, I was able to get 4 or 5 or 6 of them. All of them agreed that they would do this. 4 or 5 or 6 actually complied, and then 6. This is a horror story. 6 of them, in the last month of the fiscal year, decided that they could not hit their financial goals, and so they wanted to resign. And I said, you can't do that. You can't pass a budget saying we're going to raise all of this, and then you not help raise all of this. You're leaving me, you're leaving me in a really difficult situation here. Plus, if 6 of my 12 board members leave, under our bylaws, we don't exist. So I had to have my board members actually fall off the board in a stepped 6-month window, and they had to replace themselves with other board members. But essentially, we cleaned house. They all knew that they couldn't do the fundraising, so they agreed to leave, and I built the board I needed. So that's an extreme situation where you sit down with your organization and say, if you can't, we're not running a coffee klatch here or a small soccer club. We're running an organization trying to change the world. And that means we don't have time to mess around. I need a serious, sophisticated board. And in that kind of situation, I say, if you don't believe you can actually raise the give-get, you might ask yourself if this is the right role for you, because I need a team of people that's going to help me raise 10 to 20% of the budget. That's what I need from my board. I can't do it alone. So the hard ass kind of like way to do this is to certainly do the heavy-handed approach like that. The softer, gentler way is a longer horizon, phasing in a give-get, and then asking people and then interviewing them, is this really the right fit for you? Do you have the time? Do you have the wherewithal to get through this? But I would definitely implement board training and a board orientation. Even if someone's been on the board for 2 or 3 years, they should get an orientation. Consistently, people say that boards don't feel like they ever got an orientation or training to be successful in their role. Sometimes the problem is just that we haven't trained them and been clear with them about their roles. So implementing board orientation and board training ongoing. If that doesn't assist in a softer way, maybe take the more heavy-handed approach. If you have the relationship with your chair to do that and build the majority you need on your board.
Yeah, trying to go through. Thank you, Sean. Try and take a few more if we can. So any suggestions on building rapport when your board is scattered throughout the state, you are contracted part-time, and board meetings are primarily calls rather than in person?
So this is a really tricky one, right? Most of my boards have not lived in the same city that I live in. Most of them have been across the state or across the country. So rapport does not need to be done in person. Sometimes it's the fun little text messages that you send each other. Sometimes it's just becoming friends with each other on social media and posting and weighing in when they have insightful posts and thanking them for the thoughtfulness by which they shared this one thing, participating in their fundraisers. There's a million ways that you can kind of engage with people outside of work to build rapport. But sometimes it just means putting it in your calendar. Every Monday, the first Monday of every month or the third Thursday of every month, you put in your calendar to place a call or an email to these board members and say, hey, I just thought I'd check in with you. I think we should have a standing regular time just to hop on the phone, see how you're doing. Again, it's time consuming. I warned people about this, but if you have 10 board members and they each do 15-minute check-ins once a month, that's really not that much time when it comes to your own self-preservation and your own rapport building for your board. So maybe every other month or so, you could do 15 minutes with each board member on the phone and just kind of get and just talk with them. It's just worth putting it on the calendar and doing it, or again, the other stuff, friendly stuff on social media, showing up to the same events that they're at if you're in the same town. It's tricky, but you need to kind of get it into your workflow and into your calendar to actually do it, but find something that isn't a nuisance to the board member.
Sean, and then someone saying that one thing that they see is their board changing based on the way the president moves the rudder. How do you prevent that?
It's almost impossible. The board chair is such a critical role that having a good relationship between the ED and the chair is everything. It's virtually everything. So if you have a board chair that is operating in a way that is unhealthy for the organization, unhelpful for the organization, or steering things in a way that you don't want, you might have very little control over that. If you think that the ED's control with the rudder is actually impacting you or the board negatively or the organization negatively, you certainly could meet with them in a regular way. Maybe the board chair could use a coach. Maybe you could even position it as, maybe we need a coach together to build alignment, or we could use a consultant to make sure that we are aligned and in partnership with how things are going. Because I've certainly been a part of a board where the board chair was sort of like the patriarch of the organization, but was not very good at running meetings. And so we ended up handing off the facilitation role. So the big part of board meetings is actually when people get together. And so we had sometimes brought in an outside facilitator, and sometimes we rotated facilitation. So the board chair could actually supervise the meeting and call votes and not be distracted by facilitation, because I don't think he was particularly good at balancing out facilitation. So we would have board members rotate who would be taking minutes and who would be facilitating, so that the board chair didn't have to. That actually solved a lot of problems on the rudder question. But working with a coach, working with a consultant, getting alignment, and potentially rotating facilitation, those are all things that could work on the rudder issue. If it's deeper than that, you might need to call in a professional.
Thank you, Sean. Maybe you can just try to squeeze in one more question, and then there's a few other things we need to get to. So here's somebody that's saying, do you have any tips for standing your ground as an ED when the board president continues to overstep? I don't want to publicly disagree with or undermine the president, but he consistently attempts to direct staff, involve himself in our administrative activities, and most recently negotiated a contract on behalf of the organization without any input from board or myself. Now, that's a long question. See if you have a short answer.
I think that the best way for any ED to stand in their power is to get an employment contract. This is what anyone who's part of a labor union, anyone who has an employment contract knows. When you have a contract, you're able to blow the whistle. When you have a contract, you're able to say and do things that gets you a little further than someone who's working at will. So one, get an employment contract. That'll strengthen your ability to kind of stand up and know that you're only going to be able to be terminated for cause. That's important. And that's why we have that in the deck. But if you have a board chair I've seen this many times, is a hugely charismatic, strong board chair, not necessarily a bully, but just very, very influential in driving things. This is a tricky situation. I do think in my situation, I've been able to enlist the support of another board member that everyone knows and trusts and likes to act as an intermediary, like a third-party validator, to go meet with the board chair and say, hey, I'm just noticing that there's this dynamic going on. You might want to resist the temptation to weigh in on everything and be so directive. This is a board, not your company. And so having another board member go in might be helpful. Sometimes calling in a facilitator. Again, this is what consultants do. They help solve these problems. And then getting an employment contract, so at least you're protected.
Thank you so much, Sean. Just quickly, a few people are saying that they're having trouble with the Dropbox link. So maybe we'll just ask anyone who's having trouble to check back later. Sean, that might be something for you to look into. Yeah, I think we were able to get to it. So
yeah, can I just say really quickly, like today there's something going on with Dropbox. So anyone who's having a problem with the Dropbox link, try it in an incognito window or try it in another browser. 90% of the time that will solve it. I'm trying to figure out what's going on, or just hit reply and I will send you an updated link.
Okay, great. Well, thank you, Sean. First of all, thanks so much for today and sharing all your advice and experience, and of course for sharing those free tools as well. I loved that you drew on your own experience and shared those examples as well. I want to mention that we are going to share the recording to everybody, so we'll send that in a follow-up email. Look out for that. And now that we're coming up just in a couple minutes to the top of the hour, I want to quickly mention that if you are new to Wild Apricot or questions for us, I'm going to cover off some free resources as well in just a moment. If you're already familiar with Wild Apricot, and you're anxious to continue the conversation with Sean, and I know there were a lot of questions we didn't get to. Sorry about that. We always have a bit of a time crunch here. I'll ask you to join the Facebook group if you want to do that, and we'll tag Sean in there, and you can ask your questions, and Sean can address them in the Facebook group. Rano's going to paste the link for the Facebook group now, and then I want to say yes. And if you are new to Wild Apricot, I want to let you know that you can find more free educational content on our well, there's the Facebook group there. On our Academy, Rano's going to paste the link in for that. And this is where you can find more webinars, including recordings of all our past webinars. I recommend you take a look at the resources and content on our blog and articles as well. There's lots of helpful content about growing your membership, running successful events, recruiting volunteers, and more. And all of that content is free. And lastly, if you're running a membership organization, that might be a nonprofit association or club or any type of organization, you are welcome to try our software at no cost for 30 days. So feel free to take advantage of this opportunity, especially if you're looking for ways to automate a lot of the tasks that consume your life. Rano's going to paste the link in the chat window. I think you just did that. And you can click on the link that you see there. You'll be taken to our website where you can enter your email, your name, your organization name, and you're ready to go on with your free trial of Wild Apricot software. And if you'd like to receive a call from one of our coaches, maybe Rano, just type your phone number into the chat, and I'll make sure that Rano, you'll get in touch with them, won't you? Yes, thank you. Okay, Rano will get in touch with you. All right, now that we are at 3 o'clock, thank you everybody for joining us. I'm going to hand over the headset here to Rano, so if anyone has questions about Wild Apricot, Rano is here to help. Thank you on behalf of Wild Apricot. Here's Rano. Thank you, Sean. I really enjoyed the webinar. Take care, everybody.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is Coach Rano. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Sean. Thank you, Sonia. Thank you, Donald. Thank you for organizing all of these. It's always a pleasure to sit in on that in the end and first and foremost, listen to our experts and learn so much. We learn on a daily basis by talking to some of you guys, your troubles and tribulations, and trying to problem solve with you guys and new accounts and users, admins, how they're dealing with things, how they're growing, so on and so forth, so that we can pass on that knowledge to the new ones who are joining and maybe do like a knowledge sharing kind of thing. So it's always a pleasure to do these Q&As. Please feel free to type in your product related questions right now in the chat. If you want to continue talking about the material, or if you want to ask Sean some questions or anything, feel free to join our Facebook group and keep talking there. And for now, feel free to dive into the product a little bit and send me any of your questions, and I'll try to go through as many of them as possible. We won't keep you here long. After the expert webinars, we usually don't do that long of product questionnaires, so don't worry about it. But just a few basic ones that's coming in. It's like, are you able to continue to use your own website? Yeah, that's a very important question, actually. If you do use Wild Apricot, you don't have to worry about building a new website or anything, but there is a benefit of it. If you're moving to a new platform, might as well take that opportunity to build a brand new website, or like maybe modernize yourself a little bit. But yeah, there's no need for it. You can embed Wild Apricot functionality into your current website as well. Let's do something else basic. Are you able to import your current contact list in Wild Apricot? Yes, absolutely you can. Can you run events? Of course you can. It's a core functionality. Somebody, Jackie, thank you for your comment. Jackie asked, has Wild Apricot made any improvements to the forum feature? We had login issue and discontinued use a few years ago. Jackie, there might be, depending on when you discontinued using the forum, there might be some changes into the forum, but you should take a look at the new member app. There's going to be some new developments in the member app based on how people communicate with each other and everything. So keep an eye out for that. But give the forum thing a try again. I would recommend going to help.wildapricot.com and just typing in forum and taking a look at all the forum stuff. You may or may not see different. I really don't know what exactly your need was, But what I would suggest is, based on your need, we may have workarounds or like other solutions for you. Sometimes we'll or like recommend that you embed like a third-party solution based on your need. So give our support team a call. You guys are existing users, so feel free to, like, you have access your support calls. You have unlimited free support anytime you want. We have Eastern Standard Time between 9:30 and 5:30. You can call in anytime, or any other time you can just send in a ticket. We have longer coverage for tickets as well. Just send in email to support@wildapricot.com, and that's good. Can you import to QuickBooks Online? Hector, this is a good question. Although you can't directly import to QuickBooks Online yet, you are able to export information out into QuickBooks standalone version and then import into standalone. I'm not sure if QuickBooks themselves has updated their import files to allow standalone versions to be standalone files to be imported into the online version, but I believe they also allow spreadsheets. So if you want, you can export onto a spreadsheet and then import the spreadsheet back into the thing. But good news is, what we are actually working on is bypassing all of these things. So we are trying to work on an API link which would be easy for people to implement themselves, and then using a third-party solution, you would be able to link two or more platforms together. So you can, like, foreseeable in the foreseeable future, you would be able to directly work with Wild Apricot, and a third-party solution like Zapier will be able to transfer the information into QuickBooks Online. But that's still a little bit away. I personally am involved in it a little bit. I talk to some of the developers who are working on it, and this is one of my things that I really want to push for. So let's see how far we can get with that. With larger events, it's a drag to not have the automatic name tags generating feature. With larger, Catherine says this. This is a fair point too, but like, it's name tags is such like a nuanced thing. It's like, it's not uniform for everyone. Everybody, we'd have to pretty much design an entire name tag feature and allow people design their tags how they actually want it. And when there is something like mail merge or other name tag softwares out there who's doing that, I don't know if it's necessarily the best decision for us to like concentrate on it that much. But I mean, it's on the wish list. If you want to drive up, hey, if anything on the wish list is getting particular attention, the developers see it directly. So you don't even have to tell us, and we tell them, and none of that. But it's good to know, hear from you, and we'll bring it up in conversation and stuff. But my recommendation is, go over to the wish list. You'll find it on the website, with the forums basically, and in the wish list, if you just look for a specific thing that you're looking for and then just vote for it, and it gets some attention, yeah, the developers see it directly, and you might even see them respond directly as well. So that was Jackie saying thank you. You're very welcome, Jackie. Why have the list of attendees functionality have and no name tags? Why have the list of attendees functionality? And this is Catherine responding to my response, I guess. Very quickly, it's a list of attendees is because it's like an events feature. Name tags for like in our initial analysis and based on our user base is not as wide of a feature. It would be a standalone feature by itself. It doesn't have like conferences will have name tags, or not all. Like we were envisioned primarily for not-for-profits and small organizations, and yes, it has grown. The platform has grown to cover a lot of bases, a very wide platform. It's like, it's a tug of war between, do we work on mobile application, which is a wider ask from a lot more organizations, or do we work on name tags, or do we work on scheduled emails, or do we work on name tags? It's a tug of war between features all the time, because resources aren't unlimited, and we put in a substantial amount of our revenue back into R&D. So we're working on it constantly. And if you look at our release notes, you'll see how often we are releasing now. The release cycle now has come down to between 1 and 2 weeks. So we're trying to keep things updated and having new features as much as possible. My recommendation strictly is, go on the wish list and vote for what you need, so we have an understanding. We have one place where we get feedback, and the developers can directly look at it and decide and create the roadmap. If we don't get direct feedback on the wish list, it's very difficult for us to decide which thing to work on. Tammy asks, is there a way to have the business name show on the website instead of the individual's contact name? As a chamber of commerce, the business name is the more important of the two. Oh yeah, absolutely. I believe you're talking about the directory. Oh yeah, sure. If you're an existing user, just call into support or just go to help.wildapricot.com and type in member directory. You're totally able to decide exactly in what format each contact profile shows up. Organization name can be front and center, highlighted. Organization name and contact could be the only things available. Organization logo, if you want to add like a field that allows people to upload the organization logo and organization name could be the only things that show. You can totally decide what to show on the directory. Absolutely. I believe that's what you're asking about. If that's the case, then that's totally doable. We have been posting about it for the wish list for the it didn't have any effect. Catherine said that's very fair. Like it's very likely if you do a comparison between features and what people have been asking for and voting for. I will say like this is a quick tip on the side while nobody else can hear me. Anybody you want your feature to get some attention and love, you evangelize it. You can ask other people in your organizations to go vote for it and stuff, and then when there's a little movement, the developer will take a look at it and do initial analysis. It's just it's that simple. But in a course of a year, in the beginning of the year, if they see that there's 50 things that are on the wish list, they will work on the most popular or the most achievable and so on and so forth. If you see our current like roadmap, it's a massive list. I don't even know how to manage it, but our product managers are amazing. You are also working on improving donor tracking. Yes, that's actually one of the things that are being currently worked on, Betsy. Another big one for Serba is email deliverability issues. How are they being addressed? This is, again, one of the things that I have brought up a few times. Email deliverability has a few reasons. Sometimes it breaks. Like a couple of days ago, there was some random update on the Amazon server, and that broke like a specific couple of domains email deliverability, and then they had to be fixed. We can only address them when we get the complaints and everything, but I don't believe that's what you're talking about. I think one of the things that I want to push for is instant email deliverability, and this is of course being worked on. This is a constant thing. As you may understand, like to ensure that everybody's email gets instantly delivered, it's going to require a huge infrastructure change. So it's most likely not going to be that radical a change. It's probably going to be over time, some sequential adding of maybe extra servers or doing something with the code. But yeah, this is something definitely that's being worked on, Catherine. Oh, you're very welcome, Catherine. Don't worry about it. I love addressing some of the things. And if you don't like some of my answers, like please feel free to contact support and everything and let people know. Like the more you communicate with us, the more we like it. It's all good. And we truly do believe that your growth as an organization is directly responsible for our growth. So that's the only way for us to grow. So don't ever feel shy to let us know what you feel and give us your feedback, both positive and negative. Sometimes you'll see these NPS surveys in the product. Please fill them out as they come up. And like, I'll just give you an quick example. Like today was one of our weekly meetings, and like one of the main things we always talk about are the surveys from within the platform and the responses from it. Your feedback on it is constantly in our culture's conversation. So we are all aware of what our net promoter score is, like what our users think about our platform. So, and we don't get happy or safe with positive responses, or we don't get depressed or put down by bad responses. So give us your honest feedback so we actually have a real honest feedback, and then transfer that into the product. This is what we are passionate about. Tammy, you're very welcome. I think we have addressed most of the stuff that has come in and around. So without taking you guys past 15 minutes more, we'll call it today. Thank you very much for sticking around. For those of you guys who have stuck around, I mean, thank you for tolerating my voice after Sean's talk and after Donald's charismatic intros. It's really tough to follow them, but And thank you again for organizing these things, Donald and Sonia and Sean, for attending and giving us such wonderful insight into the nonprofit world. And it's very important, not just for our users, but for us too, so that we get some perspective as to what our users are dealing with, and not just when it comes to the software, but also within their organization. So thank you very much, everyone, for attending and sticking around. And please keep dropping by for both our regular webinars and our expert webinars. And for new users, if you are not on Wild Apricot yet, please feel free to open a trial and talk to us in product. We'll have one-on-one conversations about exactly how, or if Wild Apricot is even a good fit for you or not. If you're not, we are not shy to let you know that, hey, you know what, we know of this other thing that might actually help you better, or we have no idea what will help you, but Wild Apricot's probably not for you. But in more often than not, we will figure out a very constructive conversation where we can tell you exactly how Wild Apricot fits into your specific use case and in what ways it doesn't. So feel free to sign up on a trial. There's no credit card required, or no other extra things required. Just give us your email address and just sign up. That's the login information, and we'll take it from there. Thank you again, everybody. And I guess no more summer to wish you guys for, but happy winter's almost here. Cheers, everyone. Take care.